Hi there everyone, I'm James Matthews, I'm the Director of Enterprise Technology at Huddle. So Huddle's probably, we're about 180 people now. When I joined about 14 months ago, I was employee number, it was about 62, something like that. So we've nearly tripled in size in just over 12 months. So we're kind of going through that post-C round funding, massive growth phase. For those of you that don't know what we do, we're a cloud collaboration company. So you take the two biggest buzzwords at the moment, cram them together. That's what we do. Focus very much on kind of competing with SharePoint. So I'm ex-Microsoft. I was at Microsoft for about 7 or 8 years as a technology strategist there. So one of the co-founders, Ali Mitchell, who's our CEO, was very interested in getting somebody from Microsoft with kind of deep SharePoint knowledge, that competitive side of things to help us grow. We focus very much on the enterprise, and probably one of the most interesting things that we did prior to me joining was we pivoted, but on a commercial standpoint. So it had nothing to do with technology. The technology remained the same, but we pivoted the way we sold. So we focus very much on selling into the enterprise, trying to get that per user per month growth, the viral land and expand type strategy. So it works very well. I can talk about more Huddle specifically, but I'd rather tailor it to questions than anything else. I'm happy to go into as much as you want, really. I don't want to do the sales pitch. No, that's the last thing I want to do.
Sure.
So I'd much rather kind of tailor it to what these guys are interested in here.
Yeah, cool. And then so I'll just start with you guys, because you guys start with a small startups and now work for larger companies there. And then there's always a saying in the enterprise startup world, you need to either go big or go home. And then do you really feel the difference there once now you work in the more well-funded startups, the scale is different, and do you think that's necessary when you want to do a proper enterprise startup? How do you feel, David?
You take it first, I think.
Yeah.
There's no
What do you
microphone.
think about that?
It just
I can buy you 20 seconds.
it just shout.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's no.
So, two things. B2B doesn't necessarily mean Deutsche Bank, right? There's plenty of companies that are not Deutsche Bank in the world that are of a more manageable size. And that's one of the things that actually we realized when we did the first pivot. So we went out to the middle and small market, and you can get into that market forever, growing to a significant size without actually making the big boom. Me personally, it really boils down to why you're creating the startup in the first place. Because if you're creating the startup, because normally people that create a startup do create a startup because they want to do the big boom, but then it's not a better off it's B2B, because Mark Zuckerberg didn't create Facebook to just be the college network of his own college. He had something bigger in mind.
Sure. And
Yeah. I think it depends. It depends very much on the motivations of the founders. So, there's a lot of startups being started today, and I used to be pretty critical. I was like, oh, these hundreds of startups, a lot of them are probably doing, well, in my opinion, we're doing a lot of crap, basically. A lot of social startups and all these kind of things in the consumer space. But what I didn't realize, I think, back then was there's two types of entrepreneur. There's the ones that want to build the high growth, high big value kind of Googles and the Facebooks out there, and I definitely fit into that category. And then there's people who are just happy building $1 million business, like the Signals 37, the Basecamp. And there's no right or wrong answer for either side of them. It's just, you don't, now with all the stuff you can leverage like cloud and internet and that kind of stuff, you can build, what essentially is a mum and pop's business, $1 million revenue business that sells like a small tool to small businesses, or even the enterprise, just to individuals in the enterprise. And you don't have to be motivated about turning it into a multi-billion-dollar Google. And I think, and I think that's possible now because of all the leverage of technology that enables that. And so that I don't think there is any more big or go home. It's only big or go home if your motivation is to build a Google.
Cool. And actually, James, you are from different angle, right? You used to work for Microsoft. Now Huddle. Huddle is still big, like quite a big Series C, but scale is not really as big as Microsoft for sure. And then, how do you see the difference?
I mean, the difference is on kind of a couple of levels. On the, coming from Microsoft, there's a job for everything. Someone has the job somewhere, whether it's product marketing, whether it's compete, whether it's kind of looking after particular verticals. One of the things coming to Huddle, it was quite interesting as we moved much more towards selling into enterprise. There just wasn't that expertise there prior to kind of the enterprise team being built out. On the plus side, from the agility standpoint, yeah, it doesn't even get close, right?
Sure.
Huddle does a release every month. You look at SharePoint, you look at Office 365, you're looking at once every 3 years on the Office 365 part, once every quarter, maybe if you're lucky. So Huddle's ability to be able to react to things like mobility, consumerization of IT, what's actually happening there. Even enterprises, I mean, despite the fact enterprises as entire entities are oil tankers in and of themselves, their requirements are shifting constantly.
Yeah.
Because we're dealing with individual departments, individual parts of the larger entities. So Huddle's ability to be able to react to those has been really key. So for me, kind of moving into this market, one, we are a very small fish in a very, very big pond, but our ability to actually compete is incredible. You know, Huddle's the largest cloud deployment in UK government, and we're 180 people versus 89,000 people in Microsoft, 2,500 in the UK. They're just not able to get geographic specific accreditations. They're not able to react to market needs that are pretty niche. So you know, it's fantastic.
Well, so I was going to say, like we mentioned about the Yammer acquisition by Microsoft earlier on. So I know the guys from Yammer pretty well from my work with Alfresco, and they built a phenomenal business. Their culture is, they didn't just copy Facebook in terms of the application. They actually copied Facebook's culture, that hacker culture of quick, continuous delivery, testing, A/B testing, lean startup metrics, all that kind of stuff. They copied that. And so when you go into their offices, it's a phenomenal energy. It's just, you know, it just reacts. It's very, very fast, and they've iterated to like 8 million users extremely quickly. I think in 4 years they built a $1.2 billion company. And when Microsoft acquired them, the first thing they did was ship their analytics team over to Redmond, a bunch of their engineers over to Redmond, because they didn't just acquire them for the social kind of stuff. They acquired them because they want to learn how to run their product like Yammer. And actually, one of the biggest things I had to do when I came to Alfresco, which was an on-premise company, was try and change the engineering and the product management process to work more, not necessarily like Yammer, because they're a different type of product and tool, but at a much faster pace. So, you know, we actually do weekly releases because we're really, you know, committed to basically trying to be more agile and outcompete our competitors.
So that is actually really interesting in terms of competing with larger players. So you talk about Microsoft, even others, SAP, they all acquire small players. So they have the whole more like a product set to sell you almost everything. Even Salesforce is doing the same things there. And then so for us as small startups, how do you face that kind of competitions? How do you really compete against them? Do you guys have any thoughts around that?
You don't necessarily compete.
Yeah.
What you're really trying to do is outmaneuver them, because building on his analogy with the fighter planes, you're just flying around the cargo. So it's as long as you can stay out of his path. They don't really know that you're there, or if they do, they don't necessarily. They would never be able to chase you. So that's not a problem. They're not necessarily. When that is a problem, it means you succeeded. You know.
Yeah.
The moment that Microsoft actually comes to me and say, "Idea plane, either we buy you or we crush you," I'm gonna out and get drunk, because that means that I really hit the jackpot.
Yeah.
So, the point is, can you outmaneuver them until you find the right product market fit and start growing and scaling up? Then, the moment that they come and want to buy you, you are in a happy problem situation from my point of view.
Sure.
Actually, I think this comes back to selling to line of business or IT. So all these vendors, Microsoft, IBM, SAP, they have phenomenal, very hardcore relationships with the IT department in large organizations. You know, people, you know, don't get fired for buying IBM, that's the same. And for now. So basically, you know, they have a very tight hold over the IT department. The cloud companies out there that are going to be the most successful, Salesforce, Workday, all those guys, they've sold to line of business. They don't go by the IT department, because in the IT department, first of all, they're cloud resistant. Second of all, they have these very tight relationships with these existing incumbents. So the way to outmaneuver them is to go to line of business, sell a product that line of business want, and helps them do their jobs.
So, I mean, this is quite interesting because Huddle kind of takes a slightly different approach. One, we are targeted proactively by Microsoft. Like I said, 90% of UK government, so they poach that head of public sector. They are actively producing kind of battle cards around how to compete with us because they do struggle. And the line of business versus IT, what we tend to find is now Huddle deployments are getting big enough that IT are never the people to say yes, never ever the people to say yes. They're always the people to say no. So they veto us very, very quickly if we don't engage. So prior to Huddle selling into the enterprise, 90% of our business was inbound. We had virtually no outbound sales. It all came to us because of things like Dropbox, SharePoint, dissatisfaction. So between our marketing and our messaging and what we did, it was all inbound sales. With our shift towards selling into the enterprise, we are actually kind of doing outbound sales and focusing on our C-level execs, but we do have to engage with IT fairly early on because this is about taking IP and important sensitive documents and moving them into the cloud. So there's the inevitable kind of risk element to that, but we're very open and transparent. I mean, I spent the last 6 months talking to GCHQ around vetting Huddle. It's a horrible, horrible process to go through, but for us, it's that pain up front that means we can then sell into enterprises. So there is that kind of continuum, I sort of feel, and as the deals get bigger, and as we start to sell multi-thousand user deals, we do need to engage at the same level that Microsoft does. The really interesting thing is I've spent more time with C-level execs as somebody from Huddle than I ever did at Microsoft. Nobody wants to talk to Microsoft. Despite the fact it's an incumbent, everyone buys Windows, everyone buys Office, it's a commodity. It has to be done. However, if you want to talk about strategy, where's the market moving, how do we empower our users, then they suddenly want to talk to people like Huddle, smaller vendors who understand the market, understand the way things are moving. And that's our niche, that's where we get in. I have Apple recommending people come to talk to Huddle. HSBC, GSK, big companies get recommended to Huddle via Apple because it lends them some kind of level of credibility as well. So this shift in the market towards SME cloud provider, well, whether it's startups or SMEs, probably Huddle's kind of on that border now. It's a really, really interesting shift in the market, and it's a fantastic place to be.
Great. And I want to move to another question about social. So social enterprise software is getting very hard since like Yammer. So that's 3 years ago, and they got 1.2 billion assets just last year. And then so there's all a big arguments whether social is a layer or a feature. And then how do you guys see that?
It's often, so social is a topic.
Yeah.
You first do not understand all of those metrics I was laying, part because I'm a consultant, and part because it's a big topic. My view, I actually have the slide, but it's not where. It's a layer. Actually, I would say it's a capability. So what I was saying, I was pitching at Yipling as a social engine, and I was saying, really, you need to understand that what you've got already, what you're missing in the business is your social graph and your interest graph. You already have your kind of structured conversation, but you don't have those two graphs. So I was saying, what you need to add to your IT portfolio is that social graph and interest graph, and then use it to feed in value to create this graph, and then feed out recommendation or enhancement for what you already have. So I was personally looking at it as a capability rather than as a feature. But there is completely the opposite view, that is, you can actually sell social without selling social. That is, I already have a company, I already have SharePoint,
Yeah.
and what Microsoft jumped on the bandwagon, rather than creating a new product, they actually made SharePoint social. So you can actually do the opposite journey. Maybe SharePoint social is not the best example of a successful one, but it's an attempt.
So I think it's a layer, like you said. A lot of these social tools like Jive and Yammer and all those guys, basically by themselves, I mean, it's inevitable. All of them eventually got acquired. I mean, Jive's financials are actually quite scary. You know, it takes them 3.5 years to earn back the money they spent to acquire a customer. You know, so I think a lot of social players are getting acquired because it is a layer on top of other technologies and other products and applications in the enterprise. It's a portal into it, and the reason for that is because social is only useful in context. So if you've got data and applications that are sitting around around the enterprise, you want to add a social layer on top of it. But social by itself, just having a Facebook for enterprises, I mean, I know from a friend in Accenture, I know from a friend in Deloitte, they rolled out Yammer to thousands of users. And inevitably you end up with the groups for the new sexy iPhone group or kittens group or all that kind of stuff, which, do they really add any real value to the enterprise? Well, no, they don't. And yes, you know, it's good to encourage a more open kind of atmosphere and that kind of stuff, but to be honest, all they're doing is basically make it easier to identify people who are wasting their time in the organisation and fire them. So you know, so I think social tools in their own bubble, don't add as much value as if they're a layer on top of other applications and data in the enterprise.
I can agree more. I mean, frankly, what we've seen is that social. It's why Salesforce got into Chatter, right? Data means nothing to anyone. It's just CRMs, lines in the database. You apply some kind of social around that, and it actually becomes very interesting. Huddle's approach is it is just another feature. You know, as people move towards collaborating, consumerization of IT, you want your content wherever you are. So fast synchronization, feature. Document management, feature. Social, a feature. This all kind of plays in a much bigger arena. So we don't see social as any kind of breakaway movement or breakaway trend. It's being rolled into something. It's just a user expectation. All of us are used to the Facebooks and the Twitters of this world, and that's what we come to expect. It's ridiculous that we can communicate and collaborate better with our friends and family than we can at work. So we expect those tools to be there now, and that's really the way we're moving. And I see the entire market going that way.
Cool. And another buzzword is you talk about mobile. And then, of course, then you see a lot of vendors have mobile app and so on. But honestly, in reality, if you are doing some hardcore software for enterprises, it's just impossible to do those things on mobile devices. And a lot of people actually challenge, saying actually that's more like how to say that? It's more like a buzzword, but in reality, a lot of software doesn't really work. And then, how do you see that? Do you think? Sorry?
I think it's the biggest opportunity out there.
Yeah.
In sense,
Yeah.
of course, the fact that nobody cracked it is exactly what it takes to go and crack that market. I was offering a couple of ideas before, like the equivalent of the WhatsApp would be good to have an app on your work where actually you got all your coworkers and all your groups and your conversation rather than replying to email looks like WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Hell yes, like so there's plenty of stuff that you can do on mobile. I agree with you, it hasn't been cracked yet.
Yeah.
That's where I go. I don't go on the red part, I go on the blue part.
Sure.
So, but mobile is a huge driver at the moment in our industry. I put it up on my slide of all the disruptions. However, I have a caveat to that disruption for mobile. Cloud replaces a system that you have on premise, so it disrupts, it replaces that system, so it can actually cannibalize the on-premise business. Whereas mobile, you can't kind of replace an ECM system with an iPad. You can't store all your files on an iPad. So, so it doesn't actually disrupt the industry. What actually happened, the disruption is actually cloud, and the reason cloud is being driven and what the influence is for that is because of mobile devices. Because people want to access their content, their files, and their business processes outside the firewall, and doing that for a VPN is just extremely ineffective. So basically, having a cloud content management service, that's the thing. That's the replacement for what they've already bought 10 years ago, the ECM stuff. But if we didn't have the mobile capabilities on top of our platform, we would be irrelevant really quickly because that's where the market's going. Like SAP rolled out 11,000 iPads. Barclays Bank just rolled out 8,000 iPads. These large organisations now have rolled out these iPads, and I think a bunch of them actually have rolled them out without even really thinking about, well, what are they going to be used for? They've just kind of given them there, and now they're coming back to vendors like us and saying, well, what can we do with them now? And we're saying, well, we can do this. So, it's great for us because we get to sell more, but I think no one's cracked it yet.
Can you just add on that? That's because it's so spot on. I get some customers actually coming and saying, so I'm CEO of a large organization, we just sold out 5,000 iPads, I don't know what to do with them. And they're asking us what they should do with them. And you're telling me that's not an opportunity? That's not an opportunity, I don't know what it is.
Sure. And by the way, iPads are really expensive. They don't get enterprise discounts for buying 8,000 iPads. So so spending that kind of money just shows how much money there is to be made in the enterprise space.
Yeah.
And I guess from our perspective, probably one of our biggest differentiators does come down to mobile, because the cloud collaboration is so saturated. File synchronization alone, we took a look at the market, 98 competitors that we could come up with. There's no doubt dozens more. But for us, we focus very much on mobile, because you have things like the consumer tools like Dropbox, right? So all or nothing synchronization, everything gets moved to all your devices. That doesn't work in enterprise customers because you have access to gigabytes, terabytes of data. So actually, how would you synchronize the bits that are important to you and ignore the rest? And that's where Huddle's differentiator came in. So we patented a bunch of technology around looking at how you work and who you're working with and what the projects are and the information that you need on your devices, and then we intelligently synchronize that down. Different content goes onto your laptop that does onto your iPad, that does onto your iPhone, because those are the different endpoints. So for us, our mobile strategy, we've spent a lot of time looking at that, and it's more Microsoft's mobile strategy is so crap, it makes it very easy to compete against. I have a Windows phone, I love it, but nobody else does. And Microsoft's strategy around SharePoint and they're talking about cannibalizing, trying to innovate in a particular field, but being worried about whether you're going to cannibalize somewhere else. Microsoft spends far too much time worrying about that. As a small startup, we don't need to at all. Focus on iOS, focus on Android, and look at third parties to provide BlackBerry, Windows Phone, etc. So we have this idea about ubiquity. So a lot of consumer type services focus on being able to access your content wherever you are on whatever device. And the minute you cannot access it on your device, you default to something else. In our case, it's going to be email. In anyone else's case, it might be another service. So mobility is really important because you need to hit everyone, like literally everyone, even in the enterprise. BYOD is a big, big driver. So we need to hit as many endpoints as we possibly can. So mobility is just...
I really want to ask you more questions about being your own device is a kind of trend. So for us as startups, it means that we need to consider different kind of operational systems. When you have mobile, when you have tablet, you have PCs, they have different kind of OS systems for you to create your apps. It means that a lot of money, a lot of time to develop those things, and that's a lot luxuries for small startups. And how to find that starting point for startups? What's your views on that?
So the approach that Huddle's taken at the moment is HTML5 is actually giving us a lot of opportunities. So one of the things that we've just looked at, and we've not yet rolled it out, so I don't know if I'm allowed to say anything, but I will, is we're going to focus very much on iOS, because we look at our traffic, we look at where people go in the apps, etc., and then the enterprise penetration of iOS. It makes a hell of a lot of sense for us to focus on that. However, HTML5 gives us the ability to be able to do kind of Pareto's law, right? About 80% of all functionality to all devices in a way that scales. It'll look the same on Windows Phone as it will on Android, as it will on BlackBerry. So we'll be able to create dedicated apps with offline support, etc. for iOS, and we'll be able to provide a much greater, much richer support. Now, things like whether it's Surface RT, Windows 8, where that's going, and as the market starts to proliferate, Android fragmentation is quite an issue for us to try and understand how to present a real kind of first-party experience. But for us, it's HTML5. We focus on our core platform and then build out the rest to make it scalable as possible. But it's an experiment for the moment. We'll see how we go. I'll let you guys know in about 6 months.
So we had a really long discussion around this in Alfresco, because we spoke to a lot of companies who did HTML5 versus native, and we even spoke to some guys at Facebook, and they went obviously the HTML5 route, and that HTML5 route actually sucked, which is why their mobile experience really was shit for a while until about a year ago when they launched a native client. And so based on that and a few other anecdotes and stuff like that, we decided to go native. And if you are going to go native, iOS is the one. I think it's got 99% market share in the enterprise. Very few people actually buy Androids for the enterprise. And I even think of one of our customers, they gave them the choice of Android and iPads, and when the Android guys saw the guys with the iPads, they wanted an iPad, so they ended up switching around. So you'd be very safe just to go with iOS development, but your fallback strategy for all the other devices is HTML5, just a web app that you can let them kind of log in and still have access. But definitely iOS is the leader at the moment. I don't know where Android's going. I was actually quite surprised because I thought Android, well actually, so HP's, what was the name of it? Came out for 2 months and then they end of lifed it. WebOS. I actually thought HP's opportunity there was to bring an enterprise tablet which would be built and designed for enterprise. They could sell that, you know, at mass volume and all that kind of stuff. Because the fact that enterprises are buying iPads for their users, I find it a little bit ridiculous, to be honest, because I mean, Apple is not an enterprise company. They don't give you any enterprise real support, any enterprise discounts for buying at volume or anything like that. So you're essentially buying consumer product, and you have to go to other parties to get the support and all the other things that you need to kind of connect it up. You know, there is a space for someone to come in and build an enterprise tablet. Maybe that's what Microsoft is doing with Surface. I don't know.
Cisco tried. Cisco tried. I don't know how well it's doing. Obviously not that well, but
Yeah.
they actually had it.
But then maybe that's a reflection of bring your own device. You know, like, you know, this is not the world where enterprises tell you what you've got to use. This is where the customers come in and do it themselves.
Yeah, the shift of the market is quite. I mean, a quick stat: in November, the 3rd most used device on Huddle was Surface, which amazed me. But there was a couple of power users. Well, it wasn't a couple. It was a few more than a couple, but certain power users. So I don't know if that's reflective of, you know, the enterprise people who are in enterprise maybe moving towards a type Windows-based device, whether it's RT or Pro. I don't think that's going to be the case, at least in the next sort of 12 to 18 months. But this kind of market's only going to get more interesting. I think, you know, Apple have demonstrated there's huge potential here, especially within the enterprise. And Apple haven't quite nailed it. They do have a growing enterprise sales force. They do have things like enterprise app stores. They are starting to move into this market. They just don't make a big song and dance about it, but haven't been involved. They're trying.
In perspective on small startups, what we actually started doing is when we were like 8 people and said, how about mobile? We gotta have something mobile. So we did 2 things. One is we said we support BlackBerry because the only thing that works on BlackBerry is email anyway. So we had fallback strategy on BlackBerry, and we were supporting people posting and replying to posts on the BlackBerry. And that I still think that was a smart thing to do. On the other ones, on phones, what really did for starters, that's a horrible thing to do, but it's fantastic for starters. We just had a CSS, you know, technologically you can just present a different version of a website if the device is mobile, which means you don't develop anything at all. We spent 1 day creating a set of CSS to do a minimum viable product that works on mobile as well, 1 day, and it was actually working now. And possibly slow, the user experience was awful because it's totally not native. Not only that, but you're passing the whole web page to the client just to visualize this much. So from a user interaction is awful. From a smart idea to see if a mobile concept can work, I think it was a very smart thing to do, and I would recommend them for small startups.
Actually, so just one more thing on this, like, so at SambaStream, the way we architected our product was the UI sat on top of the public APIs, and you know, I know that Huddle's kind of shifting to that model because I'm friends with Luke. But basically, a lot of companies tend to treat APIs as second-class systems. They start building the product, and then, we've got to add some APIs on the end of it. And then as a result of that, that means if they want to go out and outsource like all their mobile apps or other clients for different customer bases and all that kind of stuff, it's actually pretty hard to do, and then they have to do engineering work to catch up with it. If you build from day one your public APIs as the interface for all of your clients, including your web application and your mobile applications, all that kind of stuff, then basically it makes it very easy for you. If you need to get an iOS app, go to a third party, get them to build the first version, just use your public APIs. So make sure you keep the public APIs as your kind of entry point to your application.
I'm gonna move to the questions from you guys. Any questions?
I've got a business question. So this relates to, obviously, our startups focusing on the enterprise space. Your clients have set payment cycles. How did you cope? I guess this is more to Francesco and to David. When you were running your startups, how did you cope with those sort of payment cycles?
So there's a financial question for that. So that's a negotiation point. So typically, if your client, you have to choose your client well, because if your client is the size of a monumental company like the one we had, they can. It's like working for a giant. They can just crush you without even noticing. So if you got to have somebody inside who just say, look, when I tell you that I got a 30-day payment, I actually mean it, because if you pay me after 35, I got to fire 2 employees because I can't pay them, right? And do they understand this? And we told this, we were very open to the client. And if you work in close partnership with the client, you can afford it. You can. Their advantage is that their payment cycle, once you can respect them, can be enforced pretty nicely. You need a good sponsorship on their side, and possibly have some smart ideas around how to manage it in case it fails. But it boils down to being a good negotiation with your client, not just being a client to squeeze you out, but a partner in building what you want to build.
So do you mean payment cycles in terms of like terms that you accept and, you know?
Indeed, similar. So you could have 30-day terms generally, or sometimes 90-day terms with larger corporates.
So I mean, you know, I mean, we sold into really the SME space. You know, these were like 30, 40 person kind of creative agency, advertising agencies. We invoiced them. We didn't do credit card billing. I would have loved to do that, and even Alfresco, I'd love to do that, but unfortunately we sell in the enterprise, so they buy by invoice, not credit card. And yeah, we have 30-day terms, and again, we worked very closely with a lot of our early customers, so there was an understanding there. And most businesses, you know, well, in my experience, they tended to pay on time and that kind of stuff. But I guess the key thing was we charged them a year up front. You know, we didn't want to get into monthly billing over invoice. You know, if you want to do monthly billing, just do that via credit card. And actually what we've ended up in Alfresco is we have a few smaller customers where they're monthly billing, and we use a product called Recurly to do that. And actually if you want to do monthly billing, use Recurly, fantastic product, the team are fantastic, and it just handles all of that stuff for you. But usually you want to charge up front. If you can charge a year up front, even if it means giving them a 10% discount, it gives you cash flow for your business, and it just, you know, it locks them in for a year, especially when you're at the beginning of your startup and your products may be a little bit rough around the edges. You want to have a chart. You want to make sure they're locked in so that you've got a chance to kind of finish the product off before they renew, kind of thing.
You can't flip it on his head, basically, by being upfront to the customer and say, I am a startup, I need you to pay me in advance, I really do. And in a sense, it can work depending if you choose the right customer or not. Of course, if the guy has his own problem or is just an asshole, then that's tough luck. But in principle, you can be transparent about it.
And I mean, we use it very similar. We partner with our clients, if you like, and let them understand a bit more about where we're going, and try to get. We haven't been successful at getting the 1 year upfront payment terms. We have a service as opposed to the technology that we provide to our partners. Right? Thank you.
Any other question?
How do you manage a lean development process when you have these large clients, and I don't know if you can risk to add features or remove features one day or another day?
Go first.
Actually, we're having exactly the same discussion at the moment. The great thing about kind of lean, continuous deployment, you know, weekly releases, all that kind of stuff, is we can iterate our product faster, we can be more agile, we can test things out, we can do A/B testing. We haven't got to that stage yet, but that's hopefully where we're moving. But then in the enterprise space, it's like, well, hold on, I don't want to kind of see major alterations to the thing. Maybe once every quarter I want to see a release kind of thing. So there is that tension. I think that tension's kind of going away. I mean, Yammer really led the way with that. I mean, they were doing almost continuous delivery. Like, you know, like I think they did like minor daily releases and weekly major releases, and releasing. You know, you could. I was actually sitting there watching their QA thing on the plasma screen, and while he was showing us a demo, it just kind of updated in the background, and all of a sudden it was like a new feature sitting in the screen kind of thing. I mean, that was a QA environment, not the production. But you know, I think the attitude towards that is have a, you know, is basically being very communicating well with your customers, giving them a clear roadmap. But the reality is you want to keep that agility. So you want the agility, they want the stability, and you just got to manage that tension.
Couldn't there be problems because of clauses in the contract or something like that?
Well, just don't put anything in the contract. So as a startup, that you, especially once you get a lawyer, I remember our contract, I mean, to be honest, we kind of copied theirs and a couple of others. Just basically, you know, and actually if you read Huddle, I know that you give it to bigger customers, you give more guarantees and stuff like that, but really, these guys, us as well, you know, at the smaller level, you give really hardly any guarantees, you know, unless you want to pay us a lot of money, we're not going to guarantee, you know, anything. And the reason for that is because that gets you into really nasty water. If you start doing guarantees on certain things and all that kind of stuff, you do have to do it for certain customers, and especially when you get to larger deals. But if you do that, make sure you're charging them a hell of a lot of money.
That's absolutely right. Particularly, there's two ways you can do that. You can do custom development for a customer, because we did that as well. So we had an agile release cycle implementing stuff that the customer was requesting, and that's a problem if your customer doesn't understand what you're doing. So the best way I found to deal with a customer that doesn't get agile is don't tell him that you're agile. Here Accenture helps a lot, because I was fantastic at preparing a statement of work and doing a fantastic master plan, and behind the scenes we had 2 weeks release sprint. I never told him, like he doesn't need to know in a sense, as long as you can frame it in a way that the customer is happy with. If you are on the product side, so you're not developing custom development for a customer, but you're doing something for yourself, I would agree. It's just, you know, if you let your customer decide your release cycle, you're giving away your only advantage. That is your outmaneuver capability. So you're saying I'm a fighter jet plane, but I'm gonna compete on against a cargo plane in how much I can carry. It's just insane. Just look for another customer. And I know it's difficult, but it's you can't compromise on what's your only strategic advantage. It's just suicide.
I'd say from our side, probably one learning is around the sales force versus a very quick product cycle. So, you know, we do monthly releases, and if you look at our roadmap, it's 6 to 12 months, probably 18 months out. It does tend to shift. Probably the issue that we've got selling into enterprise is sales cycles take 18 months, roughly. So what the sales guys are selling on at the beginning and what they're actually selling when they close the deal can be not very different. The core product's still the same, the core value prop's still the same. However, SSO, or, you know, integrating with this product or that product, or these particular features that you asked for and we said we would deliver, maybe that kind of stuff's a constantly shifting area, and we've seen, definitely in Huddle, a huge amount of friction between the dev team and between the sales team. And, you know, you get mugs like me who have to try and negotiate and help kind of spread that messaging, but that's been our problem. So when it comes to clients, as long as you don't deprecate features, which we're starting to do now as we hone our message, that's the difficult thing, taking stuff away from people. But we have our customer success team, and they are committed to communicating changes. So when we go through a big shift, we will put, so effectively what we did recently is we completely changed our files UI. And for the first couple of months it was an optional beta. You could click at the top and it would switch over. We've just moved over to a proactive beta, so anyone visiting the site switches over to the new beta, and now we're about to, in the next couple of weeks, shift over to just default. You can't go back again. But there's about a 6-month period where we slowly kind of move our customers across. And that's worked very, very well. We can do the A/B testing, we can do various other bits and pieces, get huge amounts of feedback. But yeah, definitely within Huddle, the friction's been with the sales guys internally, not with our clients.
No, actually, that's a good point about the features, by the way. Be really, really, really tight about what features you put into your product, especially major features, because yeah, once I think it's less of an issue in cloud, but definitely like with on-premise, once you put them in, it's a bitch to remove them. And actually, that's in Samba Stream we kind of made that mistake. We were a small team, but we ended up adding lots and lots of features. I guess from our Accenture days, we thought in terms of checklists rather than usability and stuff. And basically, yeah, we ended up with a monster of a product, and it slowed us down, you know. So when we actually got to the point of where we wanted to rip stuff, actually we didn't get to the point because we got acquired, but we were actually going to go for a massive, ruthless kind of overhaul of the application, because we just didn't need all those features. People weren't using them, and it was just slowing down our development.
When talk about features, that's interesting, because the other day I heard an interview of the founder of Evernote, and he said actually customers are not good at telling you what features to build, but they are very good at telling you what features are wrong to build. So basically the point is, don't ask them what they want, or just push that to them, they'll tell you whether they want it or not. And do you think that is, do you think that will work in the enterprise world, or do you think that principle is?
There's that funny middle ground. I mean,
Yeah.
Luke, one of our senior product managers, is always very keen to quote Ford. He said, if I listened to what customers said, I would just build faster horses. He would never have actually invented the car, or at least the production line around that. And so we take a data-driven approach somewhat. We look at what people use. There's a huge number of metrics in Huddle. So we try and figure out what people are using, how they're using it, when they're using it, what the activities are, etc. And so we try and guide our product roadmap both by the customers we're going after, the customers that we've got, our existing user base, very important to us, but we want to grow. We want to be $1 billion business in 2 years. That's going to take a lot of work. So we need to look at our segment. Customers are quick to complain, but yeah, it takes, well, it's why we're building the product and they're not. They don't really know. It's the whole Donald Rumsfeld, the unknown unknowns, etc. So when you look at problems like cloud computing, collaboration, ECM, but these kind of areas, users don't know what they want, but they do know when it's wrong. So that's why kind of an agile development works incredibly well. You take the strategy, you move the product forward, but you have to be able to take the feedback on quickly and kind of guide your product in the right direction. At least that's the direction that we take.
You guys agree, or any thoughts on that?
Well,
No.
I'm very big on lean on the product as well, and I actually was writing a post the other day about don't ask your customers what they want, just listen to them. And the other big quote, I love that quote, by the way, I use it all the time. The other big quote was Steve Jobs, like, I hate focus groups, because focus groups are about asking customers what they want, and that's not right. What our job is to amaze our customers with a fantastic product. Their job is to buy it.
Yeah.
He was put in this way, which I think is really good. So what you can do is you can ask customers what they want and use it to develop prototypes, and then listen and check on the analytics side whether they are actually using it or not. So a lot of customers say, oh, if you only had this feature, it would be fantastic, and then you build it and you don't tell them, and they never realize, they never find out. So why? Because probably it wasn't really what they wanted. It was a faster horse. So, and then there's a take it away part. That's a really interesting one.
Well, that's the thing. It takes a lot of guts sometimes to remove features. I mean, in the cloud, the first thing I did with Alfresco was I cut away about 80% of their features, when we launched the cloud version, because I didn't want to end up in a situation where we had all this features that were on the on-premise world kind of just transferred to the cloud world. So we slimmed down the product majorly. But then even for those few features we had in there, I now want to remove some of those. I want to slim down the product even faster. So it is a challenge. Yeah, I think my opinion on that is if you communicate clearly and you explain why you're doing it and the benefits to it to the customer, you have to have some guts to do it as well, because if you do worry too much about customers freaking out and stuff like that, then you'll never do it. And I think I've seen a lot of enterprise apps that have just grown and grown and grown with features and features and features, because no one's really kind of either stepped back and kind of let's clean it up, or had the guts to kind of go in there and say, well, look, I know I'm going to piss off some customers, but we've got to slim back the product. You do need to be ruthless about it, because the more features you add, the more weight you're adding to your product, and the less agile you're going to become.
Another question on that: how do you test the new features? You segment by users, by clients, or you have like pilot clients where you're trying the new features first and then the rest of the group?
So I don't think I don't know, because I don't think you guys do A/B testing. Yeah.
We don't on kind of features like that. We decide what the route that we're going to go down, implement it, and for large changes, mainly UX changes, we will do that gradual approach. But generally, it is we have a massive laundry list of stuff that people have asked us to implement. So that plus our strategy, we will just implement the stuff that we feel is most important and roll it out. We may tweak it here and there, but yeah, for the most part, we don't.
So. I think one company I do know that has done it a lot is Yammer. So actually, I want to bring this into Alfresco. It's a journey that we've got to get to. He's adopting all these new techniques. and the way we probably will do it when we get to that is via network. So network is a company organization. We actually follow a kind of Yammer style model where your email address will put you into a network, and the advantages of that is basically I sign up, I join my organization, and we can do a lot of cool things around that. But we were going to follow pretty much what Yammer were doing, which is essentially like they will divide it by network. So 50% of my networks will see this, 50% of my networks will see that. Because what you don't want to have is two users in the same organization sitting on desktops next to each other, on laptops or whatever, and seeing completely different features and that kind of stuff. You want everyone to
click
kind
on that button. It's not there, that button.
Oh, exactly.
I sent you a screenshot.
Just think of it, that's like a WebEx call, isn't it? So, you have a WebEx call and you're trying to guide someone through it, and if they've got a different version of the app, then that becomes an issue. But if you can segment it by geography and networks, I think that probably works better. And actually just made me think geography. That's probably an important thing. You don't want to have a WebEx call with a customer who's also using the same service and they don't have the button. So
Should we have the last questions? Anyone?
Are there any key differences in selling to US enterprises versus UK enterprises?
Oh, yes.
European?
Yeah, lots. So, I mean, from a technical perspective, no. Right? The vast majority of people. The one thing I will say actually is Mac penetration is huge. It's almost solely driving our Mac strategy. So people like NASA's a big customer of ours. 30% of NASA's Mac. It's a publicly funded organization. You would never find that here, or probably in EMEA. So that from a technical perspective, that's probably the only difference. A lot of it comes down to things like legislation. So Huddle recently had and we had a C round funding, but then a couple of months later we had another kind of small section of funding that came, funnily enough, from the CIA around building a dedicated data center for kind of what's called FISMA, federal type scenario. So Department of Homeland Security, National Geospatial, the guys that run the satellites. All the requirements around that are completely different. North America specifically acts as its own little entity. You've got Sarbanes-Oxley, HIPAA for all the big farmers. The amount of legislation that you need to kind of wade through. At least within the EU, we have things like Safe Harbor, DPA. It's despite the fact that a whole bunch of different nations, it's a lot more consolidated. So we've had to do a lot of work building out dedicated data centers and other bits and pieces. Sales teams as well are quite different. We started off in San Francisco. We have now opened a New York office as well. We started splitting out the teams by verticals, oil and gas, retail. Because that's what you do here in the UK. Because I can get on a train and go up to Edinburgh in a couple of hours, and I can meet anywhere in the UK. Doesn't work in the US. You're talking thousands of dollars in air travel, multiple time zones. We're learning that lesson very quickly. So how to organize your sales teams becomes really, really important, and having somebody that understands all the legislation and kind of wading through that level. But from a technical perspective, not a whole lot, as you might imagine.
You feel the same? Or?
yeah, and especially with sales.
Okay.
There's a South Europe that is a little bit different. Right? There's more difference if you try and sell to Italy than if you try and sell in the US. But luckily, that's probably not a problem you're going to face in the nearest term. I don't see why you would start selling into Italy unless you're selling translation languages. So that's probably not an issue. But that is different because the question that you get from south of Europe are completely different culturally from the one that you get from the US.
Sure. And I'd actually say one thing. We made an assumption about the cloud market in the US and EMEA when we started the cloud service, that America is leading the way of cloud. They're way ahead of Europe, and back 18 months ago that was the case. Interestingly though, most of our early adopter customers have come from EMEA, and actually some of the biggest organizations I know in Europe are talking about cloud-only strategies for their organization. Whereas back in North America, I'm not having as many conversations around that. And that doesn't mean North America's not, North America's still the biggest cloud market, but I actually found, in my experience in the last few months, EMEA seems to be, if they're not at the same level, they've caught up with North America very quickly. And so this kind of assumption that America's ahead of Europe is really BS.
That's what I heard. That you can close sales on phone in the US, whereas it's harder to do that in Europe.
Well, it depends on the size of the deal again. So that's inside sales. You can sell a $10,000 contract with inside sales, 20,000 maybe. But once you get into a big ASP, average selling price, you still need an enterprise sales rep to go and meet the customer.
How about the rest of EMEA, Middle East and Africa, Russia?
Oh, well, Middle
Who
East.
are your biggest customers?
Well, for us, 60% of our business is outside the US, and we're an open source company, so we've grown very organically. We're in about 160 countries, because of the open source model. It's allowed lots of different companies to adopt us, and 60% of our business comes outside the US, 40%, maybe it's 45% comes from the US, and in the Middle East, not so much activity. Africa, still, they tend not to be huge customers, but definitely APAC. I mean, if you're talking about the Far East and China and Japan and all those kind of things, I mean, and India, those areas are huge. I mean, if you look at the actual overall world movement of money in the world, just like going up to macroeconomics, most of the money is moving east. So actually, there's a huge amount of opportunity in the Far East. In the West, we're actually transferring a lot of wealth from us to the Far East at the moment, and I think that's creating a lot of opportunities over there. But in the Middle East and Africa, not so much. South America, though, is actually the biggest. I think Brazil is one of the biggest, highest adopting cloud countries in the world in terms of adoption.
BRIC countries.
Yeah, the BRIC countries.
Last question, please. Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of sales and marketing, what do you feel is the balance between selling on features and raw technology versus perception and product positioning? So what has been your experience? Because I feel in the consumer space it's more perception and the user experience.
I think most companies stop selling technological features quite a while back because it doesn't work. If you sell on features, you just get into a feature war. You need to sell on value and the business benefits and how your features enable new solutions, new kind of cost savings or agility or what have you. And especially in the cloud space where while we're still kind of quite IT centric as an organization, eventually we will have to shift the line of business to get the high growth in the cloud, and I think this will be the same for Huddle as well. And once you're selling to line of business, they don't care about features and technology. They just care about what is your product going to do that's going to enable my team to be more effective.
I spend a huge amount of time talking with both sales and marketing. Imagine we predominantly compete against SharePoint, and I would say optimistically we do between 5 and 10% of the features of SharePoint. It's a behemoth of a product. There's no way we could compete based upon that. However, look at what the users want, work with the businesses around the actual value prop, around time to deploy, the ease of use. Huddle has an 100% adoption guarantee. It sounds like a bit of a marketing gimmick, but the idea is that within the first 3 months, we'll come in, we'll train you guys. If you're not getting your value out of the technology that you've bought, we'll give you your money back. It's that kind of stuff that starts to get people interested because you're not spending multi-million dollars on a solution you may deploy in 12 to 24 months' time that may or may not do the job. It's what can I do now for my 50 users? It probably doesn't have all the features of SharePoint, but fine. It's good enough, it will get us going, it will make us more collaborative. That's certainly the approach that we take.
So I was doing a lot of co-pitches, and then I was going with James when I got to the US as well. The point is, when you get drawn into a feature war and you're a startup, you're already dead. For a couple of reasons. The first is because the person that's talking to you has a massive matrix in his mind to fill and doesn't really understand what you're doing anyway. So there's no point you adding value talking about usability because he's going to say, do you support uniforms, yes or no? And that's it. So and the second thing is, even if you pass that, typically the business decision is taken somewhere else. So if you're in that conversation, you're actually having the wrong conversation. So if I could agree more, the only defensive strategy we could have when competing against SharePoint was just saying, look, SharePoint has got much more stuff than we do. Actually, I suspect that you already have SharePoint in your organization. Does it actually solve your problems? Because if it does, I don't understand why I'm here. And we twisted it this way. and then you got actually organization a bit more engaged.
So that's actually a really good point. RFIs are the death of startups. You know, so basically, when we were doing Sandwich and even Alfresco now, we still get these RFIs coming in. And the problem with RFIs is it's usually done by a vendor who's already in that customer, and they basically define the requirements for all the features that they have and everything like that. And then it comes to you, and then you basically got to basically match their features. So RFIs sometimes have to be done for public tender and all that kind of stuff as well. But I would say never respond to an RFI. Don't waste your time. There's 6 hours to fill out unless you can get a meeting with the customer first. If I'm going to prepare like half my day, one day filling out your RFI, I want to get at least an hour meeting with you guys. And if you can't commit to that, don't bother because they've already made their decision.
That's fantastic advice.
Cool. So before you go, so what's the biggest opportunity you see in a social collaborative kind of space?
I was going to say big data.
Big data.
Okay, I'll think of something else.
James, from you?
I was going to say someone else can answer, well, I think it's something else. The biggest opportunity really is around some of these unsexy issues. You know, so many solutions out there are point solutions. I think one of our biggest value props is we have taken a step back and looked at what is causing consumers in businesses pain, and we're trying to fix that. And you know, it's similar to what we were talking about earlier, looking at what's happening in the consumer market and the gap. And there is still such a gap, whether it's, you know, the expectations of Generation Y, whether it's the expectations of people that are used to consumer type technology. So at least for Huddle, you know, we are taking this approach that there is this massive gap in how people want to work and how they do work. And it's not about social, it's not about this. Those are features, back to the feature function discussion. You need to take a holistic view on the market and try and solve it from a bigger perspective. And if you do that, you know, and have big bold goals, like I say, Huddle wants to become $1 billion business in 2 years' time. That's a big goal, and we've got a big problem to fix. But the opportunity is there, and we reckon we're in the right place to actually take that.
Sure.
So I actually think that in terms of content management, social tools, which is what Huddle and Alfresco are in, and even, you know, social tools like idea playing, there's enough tools out there, in my opinion, you know, unless there is a gap between consumers and there's things you can iterate and maybe bits you can do. What is the big opportunity? For me, it's the semantics, semantic web, as they call it. Basically, all these people are using content management systems and social networks and all these kind of things, and they're just putting data and documents and all this kind of stuff in there. And actually, you know, these documents just get lost. You know, eventually they just sit in a site somewhere where, you know, no one's going to come back and find them. Now, if you can add semantic technology, which is really a form of big data, underneath that, then basically you've basically opened up a whole amount of knowledge. I imagine a day where I don't even have to read the document, the computer just serves me the answer I need, based on all the knowledge in the organisation that's stored in documents. And I think for me, that's the opportunity I get excited about. The semantic layer that sits below the social and content technologies.
So we're saying you were actually looking for a way to sneak big data into social. You actually had to. I think that was brilliant. No, I think I said it before. For me, it's there's so many opportunities, and I'd like to leave that thought. There's so many IT products out there. Does it mean that the people are happy to go and do their job? Typically, no. They hate it. So take every single that product and think how you can enhance it. For me, the biggest is the one I mentioned before. So the really not to crack next is how to make the most of the mobile devices that everybody's using, but nobody has yet find a good way to apply it to enterprise. That I think it will be 2-5 years from now the big win.
Good. Okay, thanks a lot. And yeah, let's give him some applause.